You know, there's a specific kind of silence that happens in a restaurant where a steak costs more than my weekly rent. It's not peaceful, it's heavy, suffocating. The kind of silence that screams money, and that's exactly where I was. Standing on a rainy Tuesday night, clutching a tray of crystal glasses and trying to be invisible. Which is the first rule of being a waiter at the Gilded Cage: be a ghost, be a machine. Just don't be a person. I'm Caleb, by the way, and I'm a single dad. Which is just a nice way of saying I'm tired all the time, bone deep exhausted. Trying to raise a 7-year-old girl named Sophie who is the light of my life, and also profoundly deaf, which means my world is a mix of absolute silence and the chaotic noise of trying to pay off the mountain of medical debt my late wife left behind. When she passed 3 years ago, so there I was, watching table 4, the VIP booth where Victoria Sterling was sitting, you know the type. CEO of Sterling Tech. The kind of woman who could cut glass with her jawline and fire you with a blink. She was glued to her phone, thumb scrolling through emails like she was defusing a bomb, completely ignoring the older woman sitting across from her. Her mother, Margaret, was elegant, dressed in silk that probably cost a fortune. But she looked small, shrinking into the booth, her hands fluttering in the air, trying to get her daughter's attention, signing, "The soup is cold, Victoria, please look at me." But Victoria didn't look up. She just tapped on her screen and took a sip of wine, oblivious. And I felt this ache in my chest because I knew that look on Margaret's face. I saw it on my daughter every time the world ignored her. I shouldn't have stepped in. The handbook says don't engage unless spoken to, but my feet moved before my brain could stop them. And I walked up to the table, set the water down, and signed. Fluent and crisp, "I can take it back to the kitchen for you, Mum. Bring you a fresh bowl." Piping hot, and Margaret's head snapped up, her eyes going wide, filling with the sudden, shocking tears because someone had finally heard her. "You speak," she signed back, her hands trembling a little, and I smiled, signing. "My daughter is deaf. It's our secret language." And for a minute, just a minute, the wall between us, the waiter, and the billionaire's mother vanished, until a voice like cracking ice cut through the air. "What is happening here?" Victoria had finally looked up, her gray eyes narrowing, looking at me like I was a stain on the tablecloth. What are you doing with your hands?" "What did she say?" Margaret looked at me, then at her daughter, and her hands moved again, sharp, fast, angry, signing a message that broke my heart. She signed, "Ask her if she would even notice if I died right here at this table, or if she'd just check her email during the funeral." I froze, the tray heavy in my hand, looking at Victoria, who was demanding an answer. Well, translate, and I had a choice. I could lie. I could say she wanted more bread. I could keep my job and my tip, but looking at Margaret's face, the years of loneliness etched there, I couldn't do it. She asked, I said, my voice shaking just a little, "If you would notice if she disappeared, or if you're too busy to see she's right in front of you." And the silence that followed that sentence was louder than any scream. The entire restaurant seemed to stop, forks hovering halfway to mouths, as Victoria Sterling stared at me, her face pale, her mask of perfection cracking for a split second to reveal something raw and wounded before the anger slammed shut over it. "Check," she hissed, not looking at her mother, staring daggers at me now. I scrambled to the register, my hands shaking, knowing I'd just signed my own death warrant. And as they left, Victoria stopped by the Mactor D, pointing at me, whispering something with cold precision, and I just knew, that I wasn't just losing a tip. I was losing my livelihood. I walked home that night in the rain, because I couldn't afford the subway fare if I was unemployed, opening the door to my tiny, cramped apartment where Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor who watched Sophie, was asleep on the couch, and I went into Sophie's room, watching her sleep, the little hearing aids sitting on the nightstand next to a drawing of us, and I just sank to the floor and wept, terrified of how I was going to pay for her speech therapy, terrified of the power people like Victoria Sterling held over people like me. But the next morning, the hammer didn't drop the way I expected. I was at my second job, stocking shelves at a grocery store, trying to make up for the lost wages, when I felt the air in the aisle change, a stillness that made the hair on my arms stand up, and I turned around to see Victoria Sterling standing next to a display of canned peas, looking completely out of place in her tailored power suit and 4-inch heels. "Miss Sterling," I stammered, dusting off my apron. "Look, I'm sorry about last night. I was out of line. Please don't get me fired from here too. I ran a background check on you, Caleb," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, holding up a manila folder dropped out of linguistics at NYU, top of your class. "To care for a dying wife, 6 figures in medical debt, single father to a special needs child, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket." I felt violated, exposed. "You have no right. I'm not here to fire you," she interrupted, stepping closer. "I'm here to hire you." I blinked. "What?" "My mother," she said. And for the first time, she looked tired, the invincible CEO Fuade. Slipping. "She hasn't smiled in 2 years, not since my father died. I hire nurses. I hire companions. She fires them all within a week because they treat her like she's broken. But last night she smiled at you." She pulled a check out of her pocket, and the number written on it made my knees weak. It was enough to pay off the hospital, enough to fix the leak in our roof, enough to breathe. "I want you to be her companion," Victoria said. "Translate for her, take her to museums, talk to her, whatever you did last night, do that. I'll pay you triple what you make at these 2 dead-end jobs combined. Full benefits for your daughter." I wanted to say no. My pride wanted to tell her to shove her money, but I thought of Sophie. I thought of the debt collectors calling every day at 8 a.m., and I swallowed my pride. "I have conditions," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Conditions?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to the help negotiating. "My daughter comes first. If she needs me, I leave. No questions asked," I said. "And I report to Margaret, not you. I'm not a spy. I'm her friend." Victoria stared at me, assessing, calculating, and then gave a single, curt nod. "Accepted. Start tomorrow." And just like that, my life turned upside down. I went from scrubbing grease traps to riding in private elevators, up to the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, a glass fortress in the sky that was beautiful and cold and utterly silent. Margaret was wary at first, expecting another babysitter, but when I signed, "So, are we breaking out of here or what?" her face lit up like a Christmas tree, and we spent the next few weeks painting the town not the rich town. The real town. We went to street fairs, we ate hot dogs on park benches. I introduced her to Sophie, and watching them together was like watching the stars collide. Margaret teaching Sophie how to paint watercolors, Sophie teaching Margaret the latest slang in sign language. But the most surprising thing wasn't Margaret's transformation. It was Victoria's. She started coming home earlier, hovering in the doorway while we laughed in the kitchen, looking like an outsider in her own life. Until one night, Sophie, who has zero fear and a heart the size of Texas, walked right up to the ice queen herself, tugged on her blazer, and handed her a drawing. It was a stick figure of Victoria, but she wasn't holding a phone. She was holding a heart. "She says she likes your shoes," I translated, watching Victoria freeze, looking at this little deaf girl who didn't know she was supposed to be intimidated. Victoria took the drawing, her fingers trembling, and whispered, "Thank you." And that night, for the first time, she sat down and had dinner with us. Pasta on paper plates, because Margaret insisted, and we talked, really talked, about her dad, about my wife, about how heavy the silence gets when you're alone in it. It felt like we were building something, a strange patchwork family, but I should have known that happiness makes noise, and noise attracts predators, specifically Marcus Thorne, the coup of Sterling Tech, a man with a smile like a shark and eyes that tracked Victoria's position. Like a heat-seeking missile, Marcus had been trying to marry his way into the CEO chair for years, and he saw me, the waiter, the nobody, as a threat, a glitch in his plan to merge his assets with Victoria's, so he decided to delete me. It happened on a Friday. I had just left the penthouse to pick up Sophie from school when I got a call from Victoria, her voice shaking with a rage I'd never heard before. "Come back, now." When I walked in, the atmosphere was poisonous. Security guards were everywhere. Margaret was crying in the corner, and Marcus was standing there holding a velvet box empty. "My mother's diamond necklace," Victoria said, holding up a security log. "The Star of the East, it's gone, and according to the logs, you were the only one in the room for the 40-minute window when it vanished." "I didn't take it," I said, looking her in the eye. "Victoria, you know me, do I?" she snapped. And Marcus stepped forward, smooth as oil. "Victoria, darling, look at the facts. The man is drowning in debt. You gave him access to millions. It was only a matter of time before desperation kicked in. It's tragic, really. Check my bag." I yelled, "Check my bank accounts." "We did," Marcus smirked, pulling up a tablet. "A pawn shop in the Bronx just flagged a large diamond deposit under the name Caleb Vance. An hour ago, my blood ran cold. He had set me up perfectly, methodically, and I looked at Victoria, pleading silently for her to see the truth, to remember the dinners, the laughter, the trust. But the CEO was back. The walls were up. She looked at the evidence. She looked at Marcus. And then she looked at me with eyes that were absolute zero. "Get out," she whispered. "Victoria, please, get out," she screamed, her voice cracking, "before I have you arrested. Leave my house, leave my mother alone, and never come back." I walked out of that building feeling like I'd been hollowed out with a spoon, leaving behind the only people who had made me feel alive. In years, knowing that I was innocent but powerless, against a man who could rewrite reality with a checkbook. I went back to the darkness, back to the tiny apartment that felt even smaller now, back to the crushing weight of being a failure, and the hardest part wasn't the poverty. It was explaining to Sophie why she couldn't see her grandma Margaret anymore, watching her sign Y over and over again until she cried herself to sleep. 2 days passed in a gray haze. I was sitting on my fire escape, staring at the brick wall, wondering if I should just pack up and leave the city when there was a knock on my door. Not a delivery knock, a frantic, pounding knock. I opened it to find Margaret Sterling standing there, out of breath, her hair windblown, with a terrified driver behind her. She pushed past me, grabbed my face with her hands, and signed so fast I almost couldn't keep up. "You didn't do it. I know you didn't do it. Use your brain. Caleb, fight for us." "I can't," I signed back, defeated. "They have proof. The pawn shop, the logs, lies." She signed. "Marcus is a snake. Think, Caleb, think about that day. Did anything weird happen?" I closed my eyes, replaying that Tuesday, the day the necklace went missing. I was in the library reading to her. Wait. I had stepped out for 10 minutes because I got a text from Victoria's assistant asking me to pick up a coffee order downstairs, but when I got there was no order. "The coffee," I whispered, grabbing my phone, digging through the trash folder for the text. Someone lured me out of the room so they could enter, but the security logs said I was alone. Unless someone hacked the logs. I grabbed Margaret's hand. "We need to go to the pawn shop." We drove to the Bronx in her limo, looking completely ridiculous, and I stormed into that pawn shop with a billionaire's mother flanking me like a bodyguard. And I demanded to see the security footage of the man who sold the diamond. The guy behind the counter laughed. "Warrant or walk, buddy," until Margaret slammed a platinum credit card on the counter and signed, "Buy the whole store if you have to. Just show us the tape." The guy's eyes bulged. He pulled up the footage, and there it was, a man in a hoodie selling the necklace, but he turned his head for a split second, just enough to catch the light, and it wasn't me. It was Marcus's personal driver, a guy I'd seen opening doors for him a dozen times. "We got him." I breathed, taking a picture of the screen. "We got him." We raced back to Sterling Tower, storming past the security guards who were too scared of Margaret to stop us. And we burst into the boardroom where Victoria was in the middle of a meeting with the board, and Marcus, who was sitting at the head of the table, looking like the cat who ate the canary. "This is a private meeting." Marcus stood up, smoothing his tie. "Security, remove this trash." "Sit down, Marcus," Victoria said, her voice quiet. She looked at me, then at her mother, and there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "What is this?" I didn't say a word. I just hooked my phone up to the presentation screen and cast the video from the pawn shop. The image of Marcus's driver fencing the family heirloom, blown up to 10 feet tall. The room went dead silent. That's your driver. Marcus, Victoria said, her voice trembling with a deadly calm. Why is your driver selling my mother's necklace using Caleb's name? Marcus turned purple, sputtering. It's a deepfake. It's a setup. This waiter is trying to, and here, I interrupted, pulling up the metadata from the text message on my phone. Is the text sent from your office IP address luring me out of the room at the exact time the necklace was taken? Victoria stood up, and she seemed to grow 3 inches, the Ice Queen melting into a dragon. She walked over to Marcus, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "You're fired, you're sued. And if you're not out of my building in 2 minutes, you're arrested." Marcus looked around the room, saw no allies, saw only his own ruin, and he ran, actually ran. Scrambling out the door like a rat on a sinking ship, the board members shuffled out awkwardly, leaving just me, Victoria, and Margaret in the silent boardroom. Victoria looked at me, and then she crumbled, the tears finally coming. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I was so scared of being hurt again, so scared of trusting, that I let him blind me. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at this woman, this powerful, terrified woman who had forgotten how to love because it hurt too much, and I stepped forward and took her hand. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "But Sophie is really mad about missing Taco Tuesday." Victoria let out a wet laugh, squeezing my hand. "I'll make it up to her, I promise." 6 months later, you walk into the penthouse now, and it's not silent anymore. There are crayons on the coffee table. There's music playing, vibrational bass music that Sophie loves. And the walls are covered in photos, not of buildings or assets, but of us. Victoria Sterling, the woman who used to fire people for blinking wrong, is currently on the floor building a Lego castle with Sophie, wearing sweatpants, while Margaret and I cook dinner in the kitchen, laughing about the time we stormed a pawn shop. I'm not a waiter anymore. I run the charitable arm of the Sterling Foundation, focusing on accessibility for deaf children, helping kids like Sophie find their voice in a world that tries to silence them. Marcus is currently awaiting trial for corporate fraud and grand larceny. Turns out the necklace was just the tip of the iceberg. He'd been skimming off the top for years, and let me tell you, prison orange is not his color. And as for me and Victoria, well, last night, on the balcony overlooking the city, she didn't sign a contract. She signed "I love you," her hands a little clumsy, but her eyes perfectly clear. It makes you think, doesn't it? We spend so much time building walls to protect ourselves, checking credentials, running background checks, judging people by their shoes or their job titles, thinking that safety lies in isolation. But the truth is, the best things in life, love, family, redemption, they often come from the people we overlook, the people serving our water, the people stocking our shelves, the people who know that the most important language isn't spoken with words, but with actions. So, here's the question I want to leave you with, and I want you to really think about it. Who are you ignoring in your life right now? Who is the waiter in your story that you haven't bothered to look in the eye? Because you never know. That person might just be the one who saves you. Let me know in the comments if you've ever judged someone wrong and regretted it. I read every single one. And hey, if you like this story, share it with someone who needs a reminder that good guys sometimes finish first. Thanks for listening.